for the DFT, leading on the delivery of their 2021 A-TRIG programme, which is a very incredibly important programme and the first of its kind. So why are we here today? Today is about guiding all of you, our potential A-TRIG applicants, in scoping and completing your application. And here is the agenda. So I am delighted to be joined by my co-host for today, Paul Nash, from the DFT's accessibility team, who will be introducing A-TRIG to you shortly. Then I will be taking you through some key points in the application process, and then handing back to Paul, who will talk us through the scope of the call and the sorts of projects that he is looking to fund. A very fundamental aspect of this programme is making sure that the technology is designed in collaboration with end users, and we have to make sure that we get this aspect right. So to that end, we have Ellie Wooldridge with us today, who is CPC's human factors expert. Ellie will talk to us about what we as funders would expect to see in your proposals in terms of human-centred design and end user engagement. After that, there'll be a Q&A session. Please, throughout the event, use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to ask any questions you may have. We'll collect all these together and answer them at the end of the event. So before we kick off, can I just give a quick shout out to James Tickler, who's also joining us today. James holds overall responsibility for all the TRIG programs at the DFT. So he's your man if you have any sort of technical or general questions about TRIGs. Feel free to direct them to James, and he'll be happy to answer them at the end. So as I mentioned, this project is so very important to the DFT and in fact to everybody that's involved in it, and so much so in fact that we've had endorsement from the Minister for Accessible Travel, Chris Heaton-Harris. So sadly, Mr. Heaton-Harris couldn't be here today in person, but he wanted to share the following message. Nick, sorry, we can't hear him. Sorry, everyone, we've had a little bit of a technical hitch. Nick is just going to get the video up now for you, so we'll try again.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Chris Heaton-Harris, the Minister for Accessible Travel, and I want everyone, regardless of whether or not they're disabled, to be able to use transport with confidence and ease. I'd like to thank you all for your interest in this competition, which is the first of its kind. I'm excited by this competition as I'm absolutely sure it will find new ways to improve the ability of disabled people to travel and to do so with confidence. I'm sorry I couldn't be with you this afternoon, but I wanted to record this short message to underline the importance to the government in delivering the inclusive transport network that is accessible to all, and to set out how this grant funding competition is key to achieving that. I don't pretend that this is anything other than a very significant challenge. Earlier this year, the charity Scope published research that showed nearly a third of disabled people say problems on public transport have reduced their independence. All too often, these issues are illustrated by the media with stories of disabled people being stuck on planes or trains, being let down by passenger assistance services, or otherwise disadvantaged. And it saddens me in this day and age that operators are still not getting it right. There are so many benefits to improving accessibility in transport, which is really why we're here, driving this on. We want to reduce social isolation, unlock the spending power of disabled people, and most of all, allow them the simple human decency of getting around and allowing us to do the right thing. As set out in the government's election manifesto, we'll be publishing a national strategy for disabled people. This will encompass all aspects of day-to-day life, and access to transport will be a major element within it. Coronavirus has not diluted our ambitions here. This funding competition has been conceived amidst the pandemic. SMEs have an enormous role to play in the country's economic recovery, and we need and rely upon your creativity and innovation to be successful, even in these uncertain times, probably especially in these uncertain times. I want to harness your technical expertise and the ability to act quickly to make grant funding available to you, to help you to develop a working prototype of a product or service that can be accommodated within our transport network, is commercially and operationally viable, and can make a demonstrable difference to disabled people who use it. Aside from grant funding, this competition provides you with an opportunity to showcase your talents directly to a major government department, one with a big checkbook. And for the successful applicants, all of the associated publicity and potential for increased brand recognition this will bring, I think, would be massive. Ultimately, successful bidders will see their hard work and initiative pay off through the possible adoption of their products or services within the transport network. It's really important, therefore, that your bids are as scalable and impactful as possible. The impact of your efforts upon the ability for disabled people to travel matters the most. Throughout my time as Transport Minister, I've met with a range of disabled people's organisations, meet with them on a regular basis, and all their representative groups. Their message to me is a clear and consistent one. Whilst access has improved and is improving in some areas, it's still not good enough. Things need to change, and I hope you can play a big role in making that change happen. So thank you very much indeed for being here this afternoon. I hope you find it a valuable experience.
Thank you, Chris Heaton-Harris. That was really fantastic to have Chris there. And it was particularly great to hear how Chris mentioned how instrumental our small business community is in creating and supplying the innovative technology that will make the biggest difference to the UK's transport systems. So now I'd like to hand over to Paul Nash. Paul is Head of Accessibility Policy at the DfT, and he will give you a brief introduction to the A-TRIG programme.
Thanks, Rebecca. Thanks also from me for your interest in A-TRIG and attending this afternoon. And I do hope what you heard from the Minister was interesting and it helped sort of set the scene for the webinar today. I've just got my video turned on just so you can see me, but just for see me briefly, just to see who's talking, but just in case we run into any bandwidth and connectivity issues, I'm just going to turn my video off now, if that's all right, but hopefully you can still hear me talking. There's another agenda item in a few minutes' time to talk about the detailed scope of A-TRIG, and Rebecca will be talking through the application process next. So I'm not going to do that now, but I'm going to talk briefly about the origins of A-TRIG and how it sits against the department's broader strategic approach in this space. So in summary, there are some fairly significant challenges for disabled people in using the transport infrastructure in this country. To summarise a few of the main ones, physical access can be a real problem for people with mobility needs. You know, much of our rail network, for example, is Victorian, and in many stations there's a lack of step-free access, narrow and crowded concourses, and so forth. Then there are non-physical access barriers. So to pick another example of that, there aren't many buses or bus stops outside of London with journey information provided in audio and visual formats. And that can be really important for some people who are hearing or vision impaired or have got certain kinds of cognitive conditions. Staff training is also a big one, is really important. And now, by this I mean transport staff having the competence and confidence to assist disabled people, particularly those with non-visible disabilities. Also, and recognising that despite the best efforts of transport operators and their staff, things can and do go wrong from time to time. Disabled people have got to have the ability to get their issue or complaint recognised, addressed, and where appropriate to seek redress. So the Department for Transport seeks to kind of tackle all of these issues, or at least tries to, in its inclusive transport strategy that was published in 2018. Our sort of vision that underpins the strategy is a simple one. It's one that the Minister touched on. We want disabled people to be able to travel easily, with confidence, and with no extra cost. And we want to fully achieve this vision by 2030. And while the strategy sets out a range of actions, mainly for government and transport operators, nothing's ever set in stone, and we're continuously trying to find extra ways to improve the experience for disabled people. And as the Minister said, COVID hasn't diluted our ambitions here. We know from research that's been done that disabled people are much less confident in travelling anyway, but particularly in the COVID environment. So from our point of view, it's more important than ever that we do everything we can to improve their experiences here. So this is where A-TRIG comes in. So A-TRIG, first and foremost, sort of recognises there are limitations on what government, and in this case, the Department of Transport as part of that government structure, is able to do. Those limitations are in terms of our capacity and our capability, and we certainly haven't got all the answers. This is where you come in. We want to tap into your talent and expertise to develop products and services to improve the ability for disabled people to access the transport network. And to facilitate that, we're going to make up to 5 grants for a maximum of £120,000 available to successful bidders. I think the website might have spoken about 3 awards. So to confirm, DfT has been able to loosen its purse strings a little bit, and it's now up to a maximum of 5 awards. And up to a maximum of 120k. Now, we've deliberately not been prescriptive about what products or services we're looking to fund. There are some examples of some things that we're interested in that we've covered in the grant specification that's on the website, and I'm going to speak about that when we get to the agenda item on the scope. But these should be viewed as examples, and they're absolutely not an exhaustive list. But where we have been very deliberate and prescriptive relates to what we want to get back from the grant funding. As the Minister said, we want something that's near to market, and we want to see a working demonstration as the outcome of anything we fund. This comes back to our rationale, which is to make a tangible improvement for the ability of disabled people to travel and to do this quickly. Ultimately, and again, as the Minister said, the government's manifesto commitment is to introduce a national strategy for disabled people. Transport will be a key part of this. And now what the DfT has already done as part of its inclusive transport strategy from 2018 will feed into it. And we want A-TRIG to be, the icing on the cake. I hope that's sort of given you some background and context as to what A-TRIG is and why we're doing it. As Rebecca touched on at the start, we've got a section later for Q&A. So if you could hold fire on any questions you have gotten until then, and for now, I'll pass you back to Rebecca.
Great. That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Paul. So it's my role now to talk to you in a bit more detail about the application process. So this is my 3rd TRIG project. And the application process for all of them is fairly similar, and we get the same kind of questions come up each time. So I've tried to tailor what I'm about to tell you on sort of previous experience of the sort of issues that people have when applying. So for A-TRIG, we are offering 5 grants of up to £120,000 for demonstrator projects. That would kind of fall between TRL 5 and 7. So as Paul has already alluded to, we're not looking for research or feasibility work, as in the other sort of TRIG programs that we have. We would expect that your proof of concept work has already been undertaken. What we'd like to see is a full working demonstration of your technology, which will become your final output or deliverable of your project. And as Paul said, this is because we're looking to make tangible improvements that are likely to work. So the first thing to say, before you begin your application, please do refer to the supporting documentation, which is available on the website, as this will help to guide you. So the first document to look at is the application guidance. This is your A-TRIG Bible. It will set out everything from how to frame your answers in the application to what you can expect in terms of the funding schedule, intellectual property rights, key dates, deadlines, everything. The second document is the grant agreement. So these are your terms and conditions. Please do read these carefully because you'll need to tick that you agree with them in your application. The third document is the grant specification. So this is the document that sets out the scope for the call, i.e. what Paul and his team are looking to fund. And as Paul said, we have listed some examples here of the types of projects that we're looking for, but this is in no way, you know, a complete list and this is it. And, you know, we're not looking for things outside of this. It's just designed to give you an indication of the sorts of things we're looking for. So if you have a great idea, we'd rather you submitted it to us than be put off by what's listed in the grant specification, and we'll decide for ourselves whether or not to take that idea forward. The last document that it would be a good idea if you just had a quick scan through is the privacy notice, which details how the CPC and DFT will handle your data. So they're the documents. When it comes to actually applying for A-TRIG, we would request kindly that you complete your application using the F-Success platform, the link to which is on the A-TRIG website. If you are not aware of F-Success, it is a platform that funders use to launch and administer grant funding competition. So it's been widely used in the UK and around the world. And the reason we're using it is because we're digitizing our funding competitions, and it's just making everything much more streamlined and sort of easier to access. However, if you would rather complete the application form in Word, you can do so. There's a copy of the application form on the website as well. Feel free to download this, complete it, and then email it in to us. On the F-Success platform, as you sign up onto the platform, which it doesn't take very long at all. You start an application, it is auto saved, so it's quite simple. You can do a little bit of it, leave it there, come back another day, whatever. All auto saved, so don't worry about that. Okay, so let's actually look a bit more closely at the application form itself. So section 1 is the generic sort of company and contact information, as well as our due diligence section. Now, this section does look a little bit scary. Some of the questions in this bit won't apply to you. For example, if you're a sole trader, you won't need employer's insurance because you don't have any employees. So there will be instances where you think, oh, actually, I'm not sure about this, or I don't think this is applicable. In that event, please just tick not applicable. And there are sections, the way you can type in free text and explain your responses. If you do have any sort of worries or questions about that section, please just do email us and we'll give you the email address. So section 2 is the main body of the application, and this comprises 5 or 6 key questions. So we want to hear about the challenge. So what is the market problem or challenge that you are responding to currently? Innovation. Tell us about how your technology is state of the art. Now, this is a bit of a contentious subject. What we mean by innovation, we don't necessarily mean this is literally the first of its kind, never been done before. That isn't always a good thing. It could mean it's not been done before because it's not needed. So we just want to see that this, your idea, this technology is maybe applied for the first time in this context. Or it's got a different application that hasn't previously been used. There has to be an innovative element to it. We also want to hear about the project itself, the management of the project, and the team that's going to deliver all the milestones, the deliverables, and we do request a Gantt chart. It doesn't have to be fancy, just something that sets out all the activities and the timescales. It's really important that you select, I think question 41, you tick the box to say yes, to the best of my knowledge, all of the activities in the project will be completed by September 2021. Obviously, in the current climate especially, there could be some setbacks, but we'll kind of deal with these. But let's pretend there are no setbacks to your knowledge, and you're kind of planning for a finish in September, at the end of September 2021. So impact is the next area, and in fact, as Minister Heaton-Harris said, possibly the most important element of the application. We need to see how your technology is likely to impact its end users, and this is where it's a good idea to bring in the human-centered design aspect, which Ellie will talk to you a bit more about after this segment. Exploitation. So obviously we want to improve outcomes for disabled travellers, of course, first and foremost, but we also want to improve outcomes for the economy, and we want to see that your technology, you've thought about how you are going to get this into the market somehow. What is your exploitation plan? What is your route to market? Why are you the best person to launch this product and bring it to market to leverage, money, jobs, whatever that is going to grow the economy? And as Mr. Heaton-Harris said, businesses, small businesses, do have the creative license. They are the best and quickest way to grow the economy by supplying the innovative stuff and the great stuff that these large corporations want. So we want to see that this isn't just a one-off piece of, it's not a one-off demonstrator project. There is a clear route to market, and that's really, really vital. So the last part in section 2 is around the finances. So as I said, this is a £120,000 project. We would ask that you, from F6S, you can download a Dropbox file, which will appear as an Excel document. Please could you put all of your costings in there, and then re-upload it onto the system. While we're talking about finances, so a note about state aid. So this grant will be part of your de minimis state aid allowance, which is £200,000 over 3 years. You will need to complete a de minimis declaration if you're successful, stating that the grant won't take you over your allowance. However, I do acknowledge that £120,000 is quite a big chunk of your £200,000 allowance. So say, for example, you only had £50,000 left. You could apply for the £50,000 out of A-TRIG, and then you would have to match fund the remaining budget from another source or fund it yourself. And please, if you have any more questions about that, either put them in the chat or feel free to email us, and we will do our best to answer them. Just a few general points about the application. Please do remember to keep within the maximum word count. In fact, I believe for this time I've set a character limit, so it won't actually let you. So just let you go over. So just note what the character limit is and keep within that. We also really want you to write in layman's terms. Please avoid using sort of lengthy acronyms and obscure jargon. I always say to my businesses, pitch it to me as if I, I'm a consumer. I don't need to know the ins and outs of the technical detail, and I'm sure it's lovely and very clever, but it's literally going to go over my head, and the assessors are quite likely as well over their heads. So if they don't understand it, they won't understand the impact. They won't understand the benefit that it's going to leverage. So please do pitch it at a consumer level. So finally, applications must be submitted by midnight on Sunday, the 29th of November, 2020. Okay, so I think I've talked long enough. I'll hand back over to Paul. Paul will talk to us about the scope of the competition in a bit more detail. Thanks, Paul.
Sure. Thanks, Rebecca. I'll just put my face on the screen for a few seconds more and then I'll go off again, just mainly because I'm not being antisocial. I'm just concerned a little bit about DFT Wi-Fi. It's not the best. Right, I'm going to go on to turn my screen off. Okay, so as Rebecca said, I'm going to talk you through the competition scope. I'm going to start with what we're looking to see from the applications process. In doing this, I might sort of repeat or re-emphasize a few of the points Rebecca made. When it comes to articulating the challenge that you're trying to address with your product or service, it really has to relate to a real world problem that disabled people are experiencing when using the transport network. So you could demonstrate this by linking back to some published research relating to this country or overseas if it's relevant, or indeed if you've done any of your own evidence gathering. We just need to see, you know, a well articulated and evidence challenge. Think about the strategic fit to what the Department for Transport's trying to achieve. I mentioned the inclusive transport strategy and the forthcoming national strategy for disabled people, which I covered earlier. So showing how your bid relates to either or both of those things would be really helpful. The inclusive transport strategy is, of course, viewable online. Just have to Google it. It's really easy to find. And the actions government and transport operators are pursuing are grouped thematically. So I'd encourage you to have a look at this and consider linking your bid to any one or more of those themes, if that's possible. And of course, COVID has its challenges. As the Minister mentioned, we know that this has had much more significant impact on disabled people's confidence to travel in the general population. So if your bid doesn't fit neatly with the inclusive transport strategy or the future national strategy, then we'd be very interested in considering anything with a link to COVID. Next, we do genuinely want to see something, as Rebecca said, that's truly innovative. So something that hasn't been done before, something that hasn't successfully been done before. So you take an existing idea, but found a way around some technical issue that was previously holding it back, for example. Or otherwise you found a way to really significantly improve on something else that's already out there, you know, leading again to a demonstrable difference for disabled travellers. You know, and as Rebecca said, that's the crux of what we're trying to achieve from A-TRIG, which is a product or service that does make that demonstrable difference for disabled people using the transport network. And in doing so, addressing a challenge or barrier that they currently experience. And as I said, where there's evidence that that barrier exists. And ultimately, again, to underline what Rebecca said, we're looking for a product or service that by the end of the project, you can provide a working demonstration of. And as the Minister said, you know, operationally viable within the transport network. So meaning it's not excessively costly or otherwise difficult to implement. I'd now like to talk specifically about the products or services we're interested in. And as I said earlier, we've deliberately chosen not to try and limit you in terms of particular things that are in or out of scope. And as I also mentioned, the examples covered in the grant specification are things that definitely would be of interest to us, principally because we understand they represent current gaps in the market. But that doesn't mean that's all we're interested in. So as I say, please don't limit yourselves to the examples we've provided, but I will, just in case it's helpful, spend a minute or two just talking through them. And thanks, I've just seen we've moved the slide along. So we included 6 examples in the grant spec, and the first 2 on the slide in front of you, they cover buses, and they're about providing information about bus services to people who are vision and hearing impaired. So the barrier we're talking about here is essentially access to information about which bus to board and what bus to get off. If we could move to the next slide. So the third example, incident reporting, it's an information barrier, but this time it's the reporting of information from a disabled passenger to a transport operator, with the barrier being the lack of an easy, straightforward way to do this. this isn't a problem related to one particular form of disability that a person might have. And then the fourth example there, this is both an information barrier as well as a physical access one. The access part concerns the relative lack of wheelchair accessible vehicles, and the information part being where to find ones where they do exist. This example, of course, is very specifically limited to wheelchair users. We could have the next slide. Now, the fifth example is again an information and physical barrier, and it's about the potential use of technology to help people with cognitive conditions or sensory loss to navigate the built transport environment. And the sixth and final one talks generally about mental health barriers to travel. There's plenty of research out there that talks about barriers to people with mental health conditions from accessing the transport network, but to our knowledge, there's been less progress towards resolving them. So from these examples, you'll notice that they address different forms of disabilities and associated challenges in accessing transport. And they're not just focused on what people might most commonly think of, like a wheelchair user being able to get on a train without a suitable ramp. So if I can just briefly recap, there are issues of sensory impairment, where a blind or visually impaired person may have trouble knowing what bus or train to board, or be able to navigate a train or a bus station. And then there are non-visible disabilities, where a person with a cognitive condition might struggle to understand a map or a timetable, or a person with a behavioural or mental health condition might not be able to communicate effectively with transport staff. So we'd like to see, and we're very open to products or services that consider a broad range of access challenges for people with all types of disabilities. We're also open to products or services for all modes of transport. The examples in the grant spec, as I say, they're there because they represent challenges we know about, and they also reflect that other than the private car, buses and taxis are by far and away the most common used form of transport for disabled people. But to stress, this doesn't prevent you from making a bid for another type of transport. Now, we're also open to products or services that either a disabled person can use directly or something that might be applicable to transport staff. That the main thing we're looking for is the demonstrable impact. Who actually uses the product or service is less important. I'd like to touch on things that are outside of the scope. We obviously don't want to see bids that replicate things that already exist, unless, as I've said, they significantly improve upon it, or they put it to work in some entirely new and different way. And of course, we don't want to see things that can only be implemented at disproportionate costs, or otherwise are likely to represent significant operational hurdles that transport operators might find very difficult to overcome. Also, and while we're not in principle opposed to mobile phone apps, and indeed a couple of the examples that we've just gone through specifically refer to them, please bear in mind that a lot of disabled people, for one reason or another, can't use smartphones, and this is notwithstanding the really good accessibility features built into some of them. So when you're developing your bids, do of course think about the problem you're looking to address, the kind of disabilities people might have that would benefit from your product or service, and whether or not the smartphone route is the best one to go down. So I think that's everything I've got to say on scope. I'm now going to pass over to Ellie, if that's okay.
Thank you, Paul. Hello, everyone. Shall I go? Oh.
Yeah, go, Ellie.
Thanks. Nick, if you could skip to the next slide, please. So thank you for having me here today. As mentioned, this is a really exciting competition and really will catapult a lot of value, I think, across the transport sector, really for everyone. So I just wanted to talk to you a bit about more the human-centered design aspects and what we'll be looking to see coming through in your application and your plans to launch your solutions. So when we consider human-centered design, we're really looking at putting the human, the user, and the people involved at the heart of the system. So right from the beginning, we want to be understanding user needs and enable this to really guide the right design of a solution. Nick, are you ready to skip? Thank you. So before we begin, before the competition, I think in the application, we really want to see what you've done so far in terms of understanding the needs of disabled travellers and for whom your solution meets these needs. So we'd like you to explain how you've already engaged with your target users. So it might be disabled travellers, but also, as the call talks about, it might be that you're providing a solution that supports staffing in the transport system as well, and enabling staff to provide the required services or support that's required. So again, highlighting any of this is really critical and useful when we review the application. And then again, obviously understanding the needs, suggesting the solution, and then just showing that you've demonstrated that you check that that solution does still meet the needs and that the intent is still there. If you can skip across, please, Nick. So I think this comes through in the project management part of the application. But we're really keen to see what approach you're going to take and how you're going to use the funding. So if we can consider sort of the social model of disability, that if we enable the environment correctly, we should prevent sort of disabling travellers in their transport needs and their environment. So we'd like you to sort of consider this and consider the inclusive approach to your research and thinking about how you can really opportunise on the different needs of society, and ultimately that will provide greater impact going forwards for everyone. So I've just shown a picture of the Inclusive Design Toolkit here, which is a model that I quite frequently like to use. Obviously, there's lots of different models that you can use out there and different approaches and frameworks that you can take. I think it demonstrates the importance of that iterative approach of considering what the needs, creating something, evaluating it, and then always coming back and revisiting that. And does it definitely work? And I really hope that this funding as well can sort of push forwards your solutions to make them much more optimum going forwards. If you can skip slide. And as mentioned already, we'll be looking to see where the solutions are supporting areas of the inclusive transport strategy. Next slide. And we'll also be looking for you to demonstrate in the application how you've considered the ethics. And then I'll go on and talk about sort of GDPR and data protection as well. So these are really fundamental when carrying out the research. We want to be able to, want you to have demonstrated that you've followed some ethical checklist or guidance and thought about this in the planning of the work that you're going to do. Demonstrating that you're going to manage your communication and the work that you do with your end participants with the utmost respect. So being honest, sensitive to their needs, ensuring that you're capturing research with representative groups and respecting the time that they offer and the contribution that they're providing as well, and making sure that that is rewarded in an appropriate manner, and to make sure that you are utilising the time that they offer appropriately and using that to sort of push forwards your solution. And then GDPR as well, obviously the collection of data, being clear like what data you need to collect and then the purpose of doing so. I know people are keen to sort of collect lots of insight. Obviously, again, this is data from people of society. So you need to make sure really that what you are capturing is useful, and it's something that they've consented for you to do so, and how you manage and store that data, as well as in compliance with GDPR going forwards. Thanks, Nick. And then we've mentioned COVID already. So I also do apply for different competitions, and I definitely would suggest building in a backup plan. We don't know for certain how the UK will be operating next year, but we really need to be mindful that the optimum of doing face-to-face research might not always be possible. So whether that's from guidance from the government as to how we should work together appropriately, but also respecting the needs of individuals, that we must accept that not everyone feels comfortable engaging and moving about yet. So I would suggest that you consider in your planning different ways of carrying out your research, given potential circumstances in COVID, just to make sure that you have that all costed in. You've demonstrated that you can still capture the research that you need to develop your solutions. So as well, we wanted to offer, please contact us if you are struggling to find sort of a wider user representative group or partners or so forth. Obviously, we want you to look into this yourself, but if you do need some support, we want the best out of this competition, out of the A-TRIG, and the best for you to make sure your solutions meet the needs of end users and society. So please get in touch if you do have any pressing questions.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Ellie, for that. That's really helpful. We do, of course, want your projects to be as successful as possible. And at the Catapult especially, we do have a very strong human factors team. And we are always pushing the absolutely critical need for businesses of any kind, developing any technology, to engage with end users, perhaps even more so for this particular type of technology. So thank you. So and if anyone has any specific questions, as Ellie said, around human-centered design, or you're struggling, or you're just not sure what it means even, please contact us at a-trig@cp.catapult, and I'll be happy to pass your query on to Ellie and the team. Thank you. I think Ellie's sticking around as well for the Q&A, which we're about to launch into now. James, hello. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, everyone.
Nick has promoted you to a panelist. Congratulations. So you'll be able to hop in. So I've answered a couple of the questions already, sort of typing the responses. So let's go through a few of them here. So Steve, he says, always a difficult question. Is there a maximum day rate for paying staff? James, you correct me if I'm wrong, but no, there isn't. As long as your costs are fully justified, and you let us know why it is specifically you are having to engage those subcontractors. Am I right, James?
Yep, absolutely. I think
okay.
I see the text of the question come up in the sidebar. So at over 500, we start to get less comfortable. Different organizations have different cost bases, and we recognize that. I think where you're seeing individuals paid a lot, especially when there's lots of senior time sort of shoveled into projects, that's less comfortable.
Great, thank you. Okay, so Paul, can I bring you in possibly to answer a question from Ishan, who would like to apply to the competition. There is an app pairing visually impaired people with volunteers to walk together to similar destinations. The service is currently running at the moment, but they're looking to develop an app, presumably to sit alongside it. Could you sort of talk a bit about eligibility here?
Yeah, so just to clarify, it's an existing thing, but the proposal is that an app supports it to make it more effective. Yeah.
Yes, it would appear so.
Yeah. I mean, if that's the case, then yeah, as far as I'm concerned, that is something we could consider as a suitably good enhancement to an existing a service. So I can't see any policy reasons why we would not want to consider that.
Especially if the creation of an app would complement the existing service in some way, maybe reach more users, make the process more streamlined, and have added impacts, especially. Yeah,
agreed.
Great, thank you for that, Paul. So can we we've got one here from Joseph regarding to what extent will bodies such as the RDG and IATA be involved in A-TRIG? So they haven't as yet. I'm assuming, well, I'm pretty sure that if they sort of, it appears that they do have a vested interest, and we will kind of involve them at some point, but there aren't any plans as yet to involve them. Paul, could you elaborate?
No, you're absolutely right. We, DFT, will consider these bids independently on their own merits. If we feel it necessary to discuss any of them with a third party, be it RDG, CBT, or any external body, then we'll do so, but that will be on a case-by-case basis.
Absolutely. Thank you. Okay, so we have a question around TRL. So for developments lower than TRL 4, there are quite a few TRIG projects underway, and like I mentioned sort of earlier, traditionally TRIG projects do kind of target the lower end of the TRL, so they're kind of more focused on research and feasibility studies. So this one's higher because we're looking for technology that is ready to be deployed, that works. So we're not looking to prove concepts. We need that already to have been done for A-TRIG. So I would suggest if you're interested in sort of lower or transport research or innovation grants that are in the lower TRLs, you keep an eye on T-TRIG specifically. James, do you want to come in on that one?
Yes, T-TRIG is all tech, all modes at the earlier TRL level, but T-TRIG is closed already this year. So it closed 11th of October, and we don't have any plans to do one until probably next summer or autumn. So it's going to be a little bit of a while. So you may have missed the boat on that one, I'm afraid.
Yeah. So we can. What we're doing is we're kind of we do have a sort of list. We're keeping updated on people who are interested in T-TRIG, if it ever sort of surfaces, which I'm sure it will next year. So if you're interested in sort of T-TRIG, check it out, have a look at our website. You can see shortly we'll be sort of publishing details of the current cohort. So if that's something you're interested in, and also if you want to talk to the Catapult in more generally speaking about sort of innovation funding, then please get in touch and register interest on our website, and we can have a chat.
The one exception is drones. There will be some drones funding coming out in the next month or so. There's not much overlap between accessibility and drones, but it's not beyond the realms of possibility.
So let's have a look. We have a question here from an anonymous attendee. How many proposals can a single organisation bid as lead? Can an organisation be a contractor to another lead bidding organisation? So there can only be one lead bidder in every project. But you can subcontract to other organisations. We are not for this competition opening up to universities, so we are just looking at commercial companies. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question. So we have a question here. Okay, so this is from Emily. This is around the due diligence of the application. So she's saying, if we don't have accounts for 2 years because we're a new company, similarly for other company policies, should we still apply? Yes, absolutely. Please do still apply. If you haven't got 2 years worth of accounts, that's fine. You can say non-applicable on the application form and indicate why. We are opening this up to pre-revenue companies. It's more about the innovation and the technology, and we don't want to discount anybody. So yeah, absolutely. Please don't be put off. Please still apply. Okay, so from Zane says the guidance states some overheads are allowed in the rate. Can you provide more clarity, please? James, can I refer this on to you? You're on mute, James.
My first mute fail of the day. Doing quite well to 3 o'clock for the first one. So I think I need to know a little bit more about what overheads mean in this context. So because grant funding, there's no VAT, so there shouldn't be VAT on anything. There shouldn't be a sort of a profit margin as such, because it's a sort of research and demonstration project. But most other costs are eligible where they're real costs incurred by the work. I don't think I can be more specific without understanding specific context a bit more.
Yeah, Zane, could you put an email to the A-TRIG mailbox with some more information, and then we'll get back to you offline if that's okay. Okay. Another question here says, hi there, did I hear correctly that the grants cannot be used to help improve a service that is already running? No, that's not really the case. So as in the other example that we talked about, where there is a current service already running, but the development of an app would significantly improve the service or generate more impact, then we would be interested in that. What would be out of scope is the development of technology that is already existing in the market. So where there is an improvement or an update to an existing service, that would be within scope. Okay, let's move on. Abby said, should we limit the spend to UK resources only? Can we take services from freelancers from US or India to build the solution? Good question. I would have said yes. What do you think, James?
Yes, I'm unmuted. Yes, I think so. Unless Paul's got an objection, I don't see anything wrong with that. Where we have sort of marked people down in the past is where people have actually the bids really been from an overseas company, and you've had the UK company providing a shell and not really adding any value apart from an address in the UK. And we're not encouraging anything like that. But if you're subbing abroad, that's okay. Again,
there is under the question in the application form where we'd like you to upload your finance table. Underneath that, there is a commentary box. So if you are using any sort of overseas companies, could you please, it would be really helpful to just kind of tell us why. Maybe, you know, you've already got an existing arrangement with them. Maybe they're uniquely placed to deliver the service that they've already been, you know, delivering to you for a while, and it would just make sense to use them. So it would just be really helpful to provide some context around that. But no, that you know, we're happy for companies to be overseas. Okay, Steve. Any idea what the success rate might be for A-TRIG? Interesting question. Obviously, 100 applications, 5 grants is better than 5 grants for 10,000 applications. Yeah, quite right. So, usually speaking, I'd say T-TRIG has a higher success rate than sort of, for example, an Innovate UK competition. It's very impossible to predict how many applications we're going to get, however. But you're not looking at, you know, I would be amazed if we get, you know, 1,000 applications. It's probably more going to be, I'd say around 100 or less.
So looking at the numbers we've got here today and taking those as a guide, which is reasonable for T-TRIG, you might be looking at 10 to 1, something like that, ratio of applications to funded bids. But if we did have a big excess of bids that were really good that we didn't have the funding for, then that tells us something really important. It tells us there's a real need in the market for funding of this type. So I definitely encourage you to bid, and the more evidence we have that more funding is needed, the more chance we have of getting additional funding. Yes.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. This is the first time we're running a competition like this, as we keep mentioning. So to see some solid evidence that it's proving very popular among in the industry would just add weight to the fact that we need to run another one of these in the future at some point. So James Brown says, for innovations targeting corporate or organizational corporate organizational customers, are you looking to see customer involvement in the project? Oh, I see what you mean. Are you talking about end user engagement? Okay. Yes, we would still be, because if it's an accessibility technology, then we'd have to still make sure that you've made some kind of effort to make sure that it's the end users are going to be impacted in the right way from the technology. So we'd still need to kind of have some element of human-centered design in there somewhere. It would be, I think, good to have a conversation sort of outside of the event, if that's okay. So do you want to email us, James, and then we can get something set up? Maybe we can bring Ellie in for some advice. Unless Ellie, you want to kind of jump in on this one?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, ultimately, it needs to work for the corporate users and the organisational user to make sure that they're fully embedded and they're using or applying the solution in the system appropriately. So it would be good to look at the knock-on impact. Is that still providing enough reach to the travellers themselves as well? So I don't know if you would have to collaborate with them to capture that impact. So perhaps, yeah, if we need to have an offline call to talk about how you can capture that and work with the corporate organisation as well.
Thanks, Ellie. Peter, do you welcome collaboration, and if so, how is that handled? Can we apply as partners, or would you apply as one applicant and bring collaborators on as subcontractors? Great question. Absolutely, we love collaboration. We absolutely welcome it, and it's entirely up to you how it's handled, Peter, to be honest. You can absolutely apply as partners, as long as you indicate who the lead applicant would be. You can bring subcontractors on to the project. That's absolutely fine as well. It would be fantastic if you had a partner that you had identified who would actually be demonstrating the technology. So, for example, if you had, I don't know, a technology that's going to be deployed in a railway station, if you had a rail operator on board as a partner, that would particularly strengthen the bid. But yeah, absolutely, would fully welcome collaboration. Sorry, my questions keep jumping around. Florencio says, will it be attractive to have a working demonstrator of an accessible small vehicle to use between a bike share and a car share at a low cost, as well as an end-to-end solution on the next phases? Would it be a working demonstrator of an accessible small vehicle to use between a bike share and a car share? I'm not entirely sure what you mean, Florencio. James, could you shed any light?
Maybe we're talking functionally, so somewhere between a bike share and a car share is sort of an accessible light vehicle.
Yeah.
Low cost accessible light vehicle. It sounds interesting if it helps accessibility. Hopefully that answers the question.
Paul?
Yeah, I'd echo that. Sounds interesting. Just bear in mind we are looking for things that you're happy are implementable, that are cost effective, that are going to make a tangible impact. As long as you're satisfied all those things are ticked off, then yep, we'd be interested.
So I suppose on this, Paul, a sort of wider question would be, are we looking for vehicle technology in addition to infrastructure technology?
Yeah, I think we've not sort of tried to, we were talking earlier, not tried to limit bids in that respect. So I think as long as it's going to make a difference and it fits in with the bid criteria, I don't think we would want to rule anything out.
Okay, thank you. Steve, okay, so is saying that he will have achieved TRL 5 by the time the winners are announced, but they're currently at TRL 3. Can we still apply? Steve, it would be kind of helpful to know a bit more details. So a bit more details kind of around the technology, so what your plans are and things. So if you contact us separately, then we'll have a chat if that's okay. Okay, Ian says, are you happy for an SME to collaborate with a larger corporate business? I would say yes. Paul, what would you say?
Yep, I've got no issue with that whatsoever.
I think in some ways that's a really good outcome, because then you've got a combination of innovation, but also some sort of a deeper resource pool or pockets to help smooth the implementation and get things done. That sounds good.
Okay, yeah, this is an interesting one here from Anonymous regarding companies based in England. So can a bid be submitted if the company isn't located in England, but the project will be based in England, working with English transport providers? Paul, would you mind taking that one?
I think we will have, that's a good question. I think we will have to give a bit of consideration to that. I note that's from an anonymous person. If they could email that in, please. I'll have to have some discussions with colleagues here, and we will clarify that, and we'll might be worth updating the A-TRIG website as well. So yeah, we'll look into that.
Paul, while you're there as well, is it okay for an SME to send in more than one proposal?
I can't see why not. I mean, there are the state aid issues that you mentioned earlier, but other than that, I can't see a policy reason to object to that.
Florencio says a three-wheel vehicle. So yeah, you were right, James. It's somewhere in between a bike share and a car share vehicle type, accessible vehicle type thing. So yeah, thanks. Okay, Simon says we're based in England but may wish to partner with a Welsh company. Yes, that is absolutely fine. Okay, Zane. James, can I ask you to answer this one, because I feel you will be much better than me providing information on this one.
So hi Zane. So it is a little bit tricky to get your head around this. So there's two ways that A-TRIG provides funding. Either it's match funded or it's de minimis. And as Rebecca was explaining earlier, you've got a maximum allowance for de minimis funding you can take from government before you start contravening state aid rules. So I'm guessing you're asking if you're a research institution. I don't think research institutions in themselves are able to apply for this. So I don't think they're 100% questions within scope. But otherwise, yes, you'll need to find the match funding depending on what size of organisation you are. I hope that answers the question.
Zane, as we say, feel free to email in and we can have a quick chat.
It is tricky state aid,
yeah,
and I trip over it quite regularly, so you won't be alone.
Samit, how important is the Gantt chart? It is quite important, especially for a project of this size, that's slightly bigger than normal T-TRIG, traditional T-TRIG projects. It would be incredibly helpful to see a Gantt chart, please. And also Samit says, I have submitted the application. Can I edit it and resubmit it? Yes, absolutely. That is fine. You can do that as many times as you like before the deadline.
I think Gantt charts give us a lot of confidence because they show that you understand how to put the project together, which activities happening when, how they may depend on one another. So yeah, really a good way of getting us to have confidence in your bid.
Yeah, absolutely. And part of the assessment process is so our assessors will actually go through and check all of the activities and the deliverables and just make sure that everything can be delivered in the time frame. And it's quite difficult to do that without setting it out sort of in a Gantt chart sort of format. So cool. Okay, it looks as if we've got no more questions. If there are any further questions, please do feel free to email us, and we will endeavour to answer all of them. If you have an interesting project that you feel you'd like to talk to us about, then we can do that. We can set up a quick meeting and we can talk through it. That's no problem. I think with them we'll kind of leave it there. So thank you again so much to everybody who. Oh, Steve, yes, you can have my email address, no problem.